Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Week That Really Was with John McGurk and Sarah Ryan for this week, ending the 10th of January 2025. We're back for a new year. It's a cold start to the new year. I am frozen. I've basically been snowed in all week. Sarah's here with me, though. We're going to talk about some predictions for the year. We're going to talk about the Grooming gang's story in the UK. We're going to talk about the weather, and we're going to see what else we can talk about. It's been a slow and cold start to the year. Sarah, are you wearing your warmest clothes there in sunny Malahide, or are you getting all the good weather up there?
Well, don't get me wrong, it's cold, but I don't think it's notably colder than any, or I should say many mornings when I went to school as a kid. I mean, the school that my children went to, due to the weather warning, didn't open until 11 this morning. It's insanely irritating for parents who work and over the top completely, if you ask me. I mean, do you remember going to school? And I mean, I know it's different where you are, but when I was a kid, I mean, there was many frosty mornings that you went to school. And now it's like an orange weather warning for a minus. I mean, I regularly check the weather app on my phone. I was in the car. The coldest I ever saw it on anything here in Malahide was about -1.
It's funny, you know, because I brought the wrath of karma upon myself this week, because I started the week, people who read Gript will know that I started the week on Monday with an article basically going, we completely lose the run of ourselves with these weather warnings. People are in the shops down here, they're buying bread, they're buying toilet roll, they're buying sausages, they're cleaning out the shop shelves. I said, it's madness, it's utter nonsense. And then we proceeded to get 7 inches of snow, and we've basically been confined to quarters for the whole week. Managed to escape a little teeny bit the other day, but basically we're snowed in down here. So it's funny though, because I think clearly there have been parts of the country, some of my neighbours have been without power for 3 or 4 days. We were without for 30 hours. But for large parts of the country, the orange weather warning was, I think, completely irrelevant. I definitely went to school in weather worse than what you're experiencing in Malahide. But what we're experiencing down here in North Tipperary, you know, is pretty bad.
Should have been a red.
So, well, I don't know if it should have been a red. I don't know if it's a threat to life, which is what they say a red warning is.
Right.
But, you know, definitely I think it's understandable that the schools are closed down here, because the roads around where I live are you know, a murder zone. Just be very dangerous to drive on them. I tried it the other day, and it was, I mean, I'm a pretty good driver, as you know, Sarah. But it was, it was hairy, especially in a rear-wheel drive car.
I don't know that you're a good driver. I don't know you're a bad driver either.
We just take it as read that I'm a good driver.
Okay.
Now, that'll just be a fact that we can establish on the podcast.
We're both fast drivers. Can we agree?
Yes.
Can we agree on that?
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, I don't know. The weather here has been not that bad. Kids went back to school on Monday, and already today it was 11 o'clock start, which inconvenienced my day because I had a dentist appointment. So I'm like paranoid that one side of my face is. It's very hard to lie to your dentist about how often you floss when you live and share a bathroom with the dentist.
I was going to say, you know, your dental appointment is probably very confusing. Did you have to leave the house for your dental appointment? Did you have to tell you to open up the mouth and
I was like,
have a look
in?
He
was like, you need to be flossing more. And I was like, I do. And he was like, just don't. Everyone else gets to go to the dentist and just lie. I don't. It's annoying.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a new year, and I should have started the podcast by wishing all our viewers and listeners a happy new year. And also we should probably wish a happy new year to our new friends and colleagues at Gript over at the other podcast, The Long Game, which has just started. Jason and Ben have launched a new podcast. Did you hear Ben saying at the start of it that his ambition was to overtake us?
I did.
In the viewership in this.
But also, like, not just overtake us, but, like, you know, make us suffer, you know? Like, it's not enough that they'd win, but that we would lose.
Well, all I'm going to say to our viewers and our listeners is that it's not, we don't care about quantity, it's quality, and we have the highest quality listeners around. So we don't really care if we get overtaken. We'll stick with you. Look, that's enough of that. Let's talk about some predictions for 2025. I have good reason to talk my predictions for 2025 because did you see how awesome it was? Yes. I did an article with like 10 predictions for the year on the 2nd of January, and prediction number 8 was Justin Trudeau will not last the year.
Right.
I'm off to a
good
start.
That worked out well. You are off to a good start. Straight out of the traps with a winner.
Yeah.
But also 2025 straight out of the traps, delivering something very enjoyable and, good for humanity, for the rest of us. Because I think Justin Trudeau is one of the worst politicians that has ever existed, frankly. Him and his stupid socks. I think he's a politician, a cynical politician who doesn't believe anything he says. I think he's one of the founding fathers of woke, if you ask me, and he's an idiot.
Oh, yeah, for certain. Look, I'm not going to. I was going to try and say something nice to start the year. I mean to go on and say something nice, but no, there's nothing really redeeming I can say about Justin Trudeau, except to say that I read the Irish Times, as I tend to do for my sins. I do, so other people don't have to. And their headline on it was something along the lines of Trudeau never lived up to the promise his reign, basically they were saying, he had great potential. He never lived up to it. And I was just thinking, if you go back and it's the same story with all these guys. And it happens every time. I'll just name a few for you. Tony Blair, Emmanuel Macron, Barack Obama, Simon Harris, Leo Varadkar, Justin Trudeau. It's the same script every time. They come to power in a blaze of glory. The new generation, the young, attractive, handsome liberal, promises hope, promises change, promises something new and fantastic and exciting, and most of all, centrist and liberal, and a new dawn that's going to vanquish all the badness in the world. And it always ends the same way. Every single one of them. I mean, you could argue it didn't end that way with Obama because he left office when his term expired. He wasn't defeated in an election. But I mean, we were Donald Trump winning in 2016 was a far cry from how that started with, the rise of the oceans will stop and all that bullshit. And Macron's just another. And you know what? I say this to my liberal friends. You're going to fall for it again. You're going to fall for it again. You're falling for it with Simon Harris. You're going to fall for it with the next shiny, young, bright liberal thing that comes along. You're going to say, oh my God, he's so handsome. He's so inspiring the way he speaks. And you're going to put him in office. The exact same thing's going to happen. It's the script. Am I wrong?
Mm-hmm. No. But also because I think that one of the problems with those kind of we'll say the hyper liberal, super enlightened people who are voting for the Justin Trudeau's of the world, the problem for them is that, they don't have a set agenda. They don't really have a list of items they want. It's an ever expanding, kind of like the amount of genders. It's just always growing and growing and growing. And so they'll never really be satisfied. It's not like, we spoke about it before, like with the Greens. The Greens go into government in Ireland. They have an agenda. They have a set thing. And you could argue that in terms of their own personal agenda, they're extremely successful because they achieved a lot of their aims. When you're these kind of Irish Times liberal, super woke kind of people who vote for Justin Trudeau, what you want is always expanding. It's always growing. It's always changing. It's never enough. Because the problem is you. And so they'll never be happy. And these leaders are doomed to fail. They're never going to go in. If you're elected, and you promise economic reform, there's a chance or an economic turnaround, there's a chance you have success. But if you're the great white, bright hope for the future and you are like coming in there to solve all the bad conservative, you're going to defeat the far right, you're going to do this, you're going to do that, and you're going to do everything, you're screwed, like from the outset. Mm-hmm. And also, personally, I think that in Ireland anyway, and in a lot of other countries, that kind of woke, super liberal voter is really disloyal, and they vote for you of the moment, but they're not. And we like, I'll give you, if you use Ireland as an example, like the general election was a good example of the fact that your Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil voter, even your Labour voter at their base, like, they're quite loyal. Like, even if you're making a bit of balls of things, they'll kind of stick with you and give you chance after chance after chance. We've seen that. But if you're the type of voter who votes for the Soc Dems, for example, or even Labour in the past, because you think they're the new thing and they're going to solve everything, it's not a loyal vote. And they abandon you really fast when they realize that turns out you're not the Messiah and you don't have the answers. Because the truth is nobody does, but they're very disloyal. And so that kind of Irish Times in Ireland voter who moves from the Soc Dems to Labour, Sinn Féin for a while when they were high in polling, the minute you do something, and the thing is that, like, I've said this before, but as voters, we need to be a little bit more mature about expectations, managing our own expectations about what people can deliver, and accept that nobody can deliver everything overnight. And if you're just going to run from one thing to the next, like, or believe every single nonsense thing that somebody is running and promises you the world tells you, well, you're just asking to be disappointed, and you will be.
It's not only the voters though, because I'm more interested in the media, because the media do it all the time with these young liberal leaders. And I listed a whole chunk of men there, and I'm just thinking as I'm talking to you about the women, like Julia Gillard in Australia. Do you remember her? She came along and she gave a speech about like misogyny in Parliament, and she was the greatest. She was a great new spokesperson for liberal feminism, turfed out in her ear by the election. And what you call her in New Zealand with the teeth? You know who I'm talking about. She was the heroine during COVID for shutting down New Zealand and shutting out all foreigners and, absolutely cracking down on immigration. The only time that's ever been praised by the Irish media was, what's her name?
What was her name?
Man, see, this is it. We've forgotten her name because that's what happened to her. Then you had Sanna Marin over in Finland, who was supposed to be, another new young feminist. You had your woman in Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon. All these young leaders come along, and the script is always
Jacinda
the same. Thank you for looking it up. Jacinda Ardern. She quit before her party lost an election. You could say Kamala Harris didn't win, but like similar sort of dynamic. And it is, all these they're all liberal leaders who are promising kind of like a new beginning and a new start and writing history from day one. And the media will always sort of. And I think of Holly Kearns here in Ireland as kind of an exemplar, par excellence of this phenomenon as well. Kind of like, smiley, attractive, good-looking, young, liberal, turn the page, new thing. And it's always ends in tears. I mean, if somebody can give me an example, and feel free in the comments, because I can't think of every politician in world history, of that kind of leader who has succeeded. I mean, please, by all means.
Well, I mean, it depends on what you define success as. I mean, you could say Obama. I mean, Obama was media creation and he did 2 terms. And like, obviously the backlash to that was that Donald Trump got elected, whatever you could say. But like he in his time, he was successful within the realms of what you're talking about. They didn't turn on him. He's still considered to be great.
I think great is pushing it a bit. He passed one relatively moderate healthcare reform. That was kind of it for his 2 terms.
But he's still kind of he wasn't turfed out in his ear. He's still the one. He's still the guy that people want to have a drink with, and he's still hip and cool. And when he shows up, everybody cheers. Kind of, he's not. Yep. He's not like he wasn't turned on in the public mind.
There's truth to that. There's truth to that. But I mean, that he is product of a unique system in the United States where they're term limited. So like, he was forced out of office after 8 years by the law, as in fairness, Bill Clinton was before him and so on. Bill Clinton, actually another good example, possibly, of a politician who is of that mold, the young guy as he was in 1992, who comes in and, promises a whole new fresh start and everything. But both Clinton and Obama were succeeded by Republicans who were their polar opposites. People got sick of them. After 8 years of Clinton, people went to gum chewing, cowboy hat wearing George W. Bush. And after Barack Obama, they went to literally the guy who said, I think Obama might be from Kenya. I mean, so like that would suggest that the voters were in their own way ready for something different after 8 years, even though you couldn't say they lost elections.
It's always with you with the little jobs, isn't it? It's always with the jobs.
Right. Well, look, you know what? We've talked enough about my wonderful prediction about Justin Trudeau, which came through inside 8 days of my making it such a savant. Am I? Your turn. Make a prediction for 2025.
Oh God. Okay. I think that we're going to start to feel a little bit of economic turn. I think there's going to be consequences for our approach to Israel. Again, not going to get into it, but I think that, what the Irish government decided to do, and by the way, that's what the public want as well, I think, in general. So they can't be blamed later. That's what they want. I think that's going to have consequences, economic consequences. I think Donald Trump becoming president is going to have economic consequences. And I think that we're going to start to feel, the pinch of some of those decisions this year in some form. That's the first thing. Second thing is we're going to run a presidential election, which I think that the government, I think you're right about, your prediction was that Francis Black would run. I think that the government parties will kind of get behind somebody, together. But I don't think whoever is going to win that, I don't think they've emerged yet. You know what I mean? Politically, it's funny. I was thinking about it this morning.
Can I just say that's a pretty shit prediction that we're going to have a presidential election and you don't know who's going to win it. I mean, I think I could have done that one myself.
I don't think Bertie Ahern or anybody like that is going to run for president. If that's a prediction, I don't think it's going to. I cannot think of the person who's going to win, and that's why I'm saying I don't think they're going to. They haven't appeared yet. I think it's going to be a pretty boring year politically. We just had a presidential election. We had local and European elections. We had a general election, American election, should I say, presidential election. We had local elections here. We had 2 referenda. I think we had our fill last year. And frankly, I wouldn't mind a break. I think your prediction about immigration is right. I think immigration is getting worse, more out of control. And it was kind of, the lid was put on it for political reasons running up to the campaign. But I think that some of the things, the sheer numbers and some of the iPass centres that are coming up and the way people are going to react to them is going to bring that back into the centre again, and it's going to get hot. What other predictions did you have? Oh, I agree with your prediction that I think that the war in the Middle East and the war in the Ukraine will be over by the end of the year.
Yes, and I said
I've always said that. I've always said that. Like, I think that they'll be over soon. I think that those wars will be over in the first couple of months of Donald Trump taking office.
No, but 24 hours, he said, Sarah. 24 hours. Anyway. Look, I did predict the Occupied Territories Bill will not pass, and it brings me back to something you were talking about there a second ago, which is that whole sort of backlash thing. And it's fascinating. I don't know if anyone heard this week, Regina Doherty. I obviously don't listen to RTE, but several people sent me the clip. Regina Doherty, one of our great stateswomen of our time.
9 genders.
Representative of Dublin, inventor of 9 genders, representative of Ireland in the European Parliament. And she said, and I'm not quoting directly, but I'm going to paraphrase. She said, the Occupied Territories Bill will hurt Ireland economically. It'll provoke a backlash economically from the European Union and from the United States. It will have very little effect on Israel, but we absolutely have to pass it. And I thought to myself, and everyone knows, I am an Israeli shill. As I said that once, somebody always mentions it in the comments. I have thought Ireland's position on the Middle East was absurd nonsense from day one. I maintain that position. I make no apologies for it. But assume that I didn't. Assume that I was just completely neutral on the Occupied Territories Bill. To hear a politician say, it's going to hurt us, it's not really going to accomplish any of its aims, it's going to provoke an economic backlash and hurt us internationally, but we have to pass it anyway. I mean, was she being sent out to sabotage the thing, do we think, or is she just that thick?
Sorry, do you want me to answer that?
Well, that was a semi-rhetorical question.
Okay, keep it rhetorical. Go on.
I mean, look, I just haven't seen anything like that for a while. And I mean, then RTE kind of didn't put it on the RTE player for a few days and just disappeared, was floating around. But it's just baffling. And I do think one of my predictions, I think you just said, we'll suffer some kind of economic backlash. I think maybe I'm wrong, but I think at some point the adults will get in the room about that Occupied Territories Bill, and the same thing will happen to it this year as happened to the hate speech bill last year, which is that officially it will be proceeding, but it will proceed at such a slow pace that they'll never quite get around to it. That's my prediction there. I could be wrong. Okay. I've been wrong. I've been wrong about their insanity on this topic since day one. So I mean, why break the habit of life?
But I think some of the consequences that are coming from, some of the global political issues that are coming up in the next year are already in motion, whether, like, for example, whether the Occupied Territories Bill goes ahead or not. The Israeli embassy is leaving Ireland. There's Simon Harris is calling Donald Trump a ghoul. I noticed that he was softening and tapering his language a little bit on that this week, saying that it was kind of a joke. Like, my issue with this is that Ireland is a small country that has always, featured larger in the world stage than, size you would expect. And we're supposedly a neutral country, but you can't go around insulting people and kind of, and expect there to be no consequences. So, I mean, I just think that like it's the occupied territories bill aside, I think that Ireland has made very clear our position when it comes to Israel, and Ireland has made our Taoiseach he won't be the Taoiseach probably by March, but one of our leaders has made very clear his opinion on the new leader of America. And so I think that those things are, that the consequences that we'll feel from those kind of things is already in motion.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting. Finn McRedmond in the Irish Times, he's a very good writer and actually somebody worth reading, regardless of the fact that she writes the Irish Times. She had a piece today, this is Thursday, we're recording this, all is going out on Friday, recording on Thursday, basically saying that Ireland has squandered an awful lot of goodwill in the European Union. And she cited something I thought was very interesting in retrospect. You think back on things that happened actually years ago now. But she said it all started with Phil Hogan. Phil Hogan was the trade commissioner, one of the most powerful jobs we could get in the European Union as EU commissioner. And we sacked him. I don't know if you remember that. Do you remember Phil Hogan got sacked because he ate a dinner during COVID? He literally went, do you remember? He went and he sat down and he ate a dinner somewhere, and him and I think Dara Calleary got sacked as a cabinet minister, and a few other people got sacked. And she makes the point in the article that Sean O'Rourke, for the RTE presenter, sacked. They all had dinner when they shouldn't have had dinner. They should have been at home within their 5 kilometres, and they didn't. They ate dinner and it cost them their careers. And she makes the point that around Europe, people looked at us like with two heads. You've got one of the biggest jobs in Europe. You just sacked the guy who had it. Then she cites, obviously, Ireland's neutrality in a militarising Europe, the whole business of Michael D. Higgins's bizarre conduct, which she says is regularly known. And this is not me saying, this is the Irish Times, is regularly noticed around Europe. Then you've got the whole Israel thing, which doesn't help. As she just says, like, Ireland's standing is at a very low ebb, which anyone who's been reading my writing, because I do talk to various diplomats from European embassies based in Dublin, and I can tell you that there is, this country's standing is at a very low level in the European Union right about now, whatever about the rest of the world. And I think that's going to get worse.
Yeah. But also the difference between this situation and other situations in the past, and like I think the podcast, 100 episodes in, people will understand that this isn't my opinion, obviously, but the difference in this situation is that the Irish government, whether they're being hypercritical and obviously critical of Donald Trump or Israel or whatever, are actually representing what a lot of Irish people want. They're saying what a lot of Irish people want them to say. Not all, but a lot. So if that has consequences you got what you wanted, like on your heads be it. It won't be my fault because they're not speaking on my behalf when they, like Simon Harrison's speaking on my behalf, and I wouldn't dream of calling a potential future former president of America a gowl unless I wouldn't call a political opponent or somebody who I disagree with a gowl when I was in Taoiseach's office, unless I was in college politics, and I still would think I look childish for that. So like, that's not me. But these things have consequences, but they are representative. I mean, when I go onto Instagram and I meet people, they are representative of what a lot of people in Ireland want their politicians to be saying. So, do it, but don't cry about it later. It's what you wanted. Yeah,
it's kind of, that point you make is a very important one, which is that, like, I just don't know. I remember a few years ago being in the Caribbean, and people meet you and they ask you where you're from. And I said, I'm from
the Caribbean.
Ireland.
Was it the Caribbean? Do you call it the Caribbean?
I call it the Caribbean or the Caribbean. Whatever. That nice part of the world. It's a humble brag. I was there. I remember specifically, like 5 or 6 people were like, where are you from? And I said, I'm from Ireland. And not one of them had a clue, not a beanie where Ireland was. Like they knew it was like part of England, which is most amusing. And that was it, even though we're not part of England. Obviously, they believed it was. No idea that we're even an independent country. Whereas in Ireland, I think there is this kind of sense, and you see it in people, like, it's very important that the Taoiseach says something about X, Y, and Z. No, it's really not. It's often more important that he keeps his head down. We are smaller economically than, smaller in terms of population than like 47 of the US 50 states. Just keep your head down. Say nothing. Move on. I mean, issue a joint statement through the European Union deploring the slaughter in Gaza and hoping for a ceasefire soon, like everyone else has done.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, look, people are not going to change on that one because they're convinced that, I don't know what they're convinced of, but they're convinced of something. What other predictions did I make, since you're quite bad at making them?
Sorry, my track record of predictions on this podcast is better than yours. There's just not a lot going on. There's just not a lot going on this year.
There isn't. Well, actually, do you know what? I did make one other one. That's a good segue into our next topic. Because I said that the Right Honourable Sir Keir Starmer, KC, First Lord of the Treasury and Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, would not last the year in his job. And I made that prediction before this week because I didn't see the grooming. I wasn't aware of the grooming gang scandal, but I didn't see it going back as much of an issue as it has. But I thought before that he was in trouble. Do you think I'm off the mark there, or do you think he'll power through on the strength of his major majority?
Well, I mean, let's get into it. I mean, they voted against an investigation. Mm-hmm. That's not to say that that's necessarily good for him, because I think, like, I would, if I was advising him, I would have some reservations that voting against a thorough investigation into how this happened would actually damage him long term. And that perhaps the way to go about it would have been to have full transparency, absolutely slam your fist down on your desk and say, we're going to figure out exactly what the hell has been going on here. So long term, that might turn out to be a bad thing. I mean, I think that as the scale of this, and I don't know if you've read any of the stuff, and I wouldn't recommend that anybody does, because it's just, I mean, it's like something made up, but it's so horrifying. But I think as the scale of it unravels and it goes on, the anger will grow. And do I think that it could be the beginning of the end for him? Like, I don't think he's in any imminent danger, but do I think it could be massively damaging for him within the next year? Yes. I think that people are only slowly coming to the realization of what exactly has been going on here. And there isn't, like, the narrative isn't quite shaped yet around why this was kept quiet. And I think that as that emerges, there will be hell to pay.
It's funny that he's getting so much of the blame, given that a lot of these trials came to light sort of 2010, 2011, when the Labour Party wasn't in office. Now, a lot of them happened during the sort of Blair Brown era. A lot of the crime happened back then. But we'll talk more about the grooming gangs themselves in a minute. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about his prospects, because obviously Elon Musk has said, I want him gone. I want rid of him. And this has provoked a whole massive meltdown on the left about how dare Elon Musk as a billionaire try and influence politics. And I just wanted to say, like, what's your opinion on that? Because I have a very strong opinion on it.
Well, I have a pretty strong opinion on it as well, because if you're dumb enough to think that global forces haven't been impacting on Irish and UK political discourse for the last 10 years, you're stupider than I thought. I mean, that's it. Like, loads of our NGOs get funding from outside. We've been involved in referenda where it's obvious that influence is coming. Like, come on. Like, I mean, I actually don't really think that domestically Elon Musk saying that does Keir Starmer that much damage. But like the pearl clutching about external forces impacting on is, I mean, come on, you must be joking me that anybody thinks that that's a new concept. Like, oh, we must stop this. Why? Because it's suddenly by somebody you don't like.
I would go further than that.
Hypocrisy at, Yeah,
I go further than that, because I actually think, anyone who's read anything I've written about Elon Musk knows that I can be relentlessly critical of him. Not that I'm sure he cares. Why would he give a boot? But I think his particular mechanism of interference is to be applauded. Here's one of the richest guys on the planet who is interfering in British politics. That is not a first. I mean, back in the early 90s, George Soros basically collapsed the British economy on Black Thursday or Black Friday, I think it was, by fiddling with the British pound. You've got billionaires around the place who've bought lobbyists, put ex-ministers on their board, bought media outlets. The Daily Telegraph seems to change hands between various billionaires every couple of years. You've Rupert Murdoch setting the agenda with his newspapers and his television channels. Here's Elon Musk, one of the richest guys in the world, who could do all that. He could buy newspapers, he could buy lobbyists, he could fund NGOs, he could hide behind the shadows and just say, I make cars and I go to Mars, and not try to, and basically hide his influence. Or he could just say, yeah, I think Keir Starmer should go. He's not up to the job. I'm going to tell you how to vote openly and on my platform with millions of people where you can see exactly what I'm doing. I think it is far more admirable than this nonsense of Chuck Feeney putting billions into the Irish political sphere by funding all his little pet NGOs. Or even Rupert Murdoch buying a whole load of newspapers. I think what Elon Musk's mechanism for influencing politics is much more honest, much fairer, and should be welcomed as an act of openness and transparency rather than how it usually happens. Or am I reaching? But that's what I think.
Well, at least you know what it is and who it is, like, for sure. Yeah. I don't think it impacts the voting that much, but I don't think that's really the point. And, like, he's watching something unfold that's horrifying, that's most people in the world find horrifying, and he's commenting on it, and he's commenting on a platform where everybody can see who he is and what he's about and how rich he is and blah, 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 blah. So, like you say, it's more transparent than loads of other things. I mean, idea that, again, and I know because we've been involved in politics a long time, particularly in referendums, like NGOs. I mean, don't get me started. Go online and search where NGOs get some of their funding.
Yeah.
And tell me that they're not agenda driven. You know what I mean? The problem is it's not, and it's like everything else. It's the hypocrisy that kills me. It's not that you have a problem with outside interference in political discourse or political conversations or the elections of our country. It's that you have a problem with it, but it's when it's by and for people you don't like. So you don't have a problem with the principle. You just don't like losing, because the truth is that they're annoyed because he has massive influence and he might actually impact it.
The funny thing is,
it's about the losing, not about the principle.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is, you go back and you think about the last UK general election. About 4 months before that election, there was a moment. It was a Sunday, and the newspapers landed on Sky News for their Sky News review of the papers. It's on every night at 10, 11 o'clock. And the Sun came out for Labour. It was like, we're switching to the Labour Party. We are ditching the Tories. We're for Starmer. Just as they had done for Tony Blair back in 1997. And that was heralded as a great moment, a tremendous PR triumph for the Labour Party, essentially because they had won the backing, and this would always go to the top in News International, of Rupert Murdoch, one of the biggest, most powerful billionaires in the world. I don't remember any hand ringing on the British left about, influence of millionaires and billionaires in politics at that stage. It was, we got the Sun. So, you're right. Yeah. Anyway, we've made that point. Let's talk about what actually happened. I suppose this came back into my consciousness reading that sentencing report that Elon Musk tweeted. Did you read it?
Some of it.
Yeah. I wrote a piece a few days ago, which went fairly viral. It was my most read. It wasn't Gript's most read. It was my most read piece since the new year, basically saying this was cultural and it was religious and it was sexism and racism all in one. I mean, you've these male Pakistani Muslims disproportionately, almost overwhelmingly recruiting and raping young white girls. There were no young Pakistani girls. I think there was maybe one in Oxford. But aside from that, it was almost overwhelmingly young white girls being victimized by Pakistani male Muslims.
And the goal was white girls because they were considered to be sluts or whatever.
It's a difficult thing. It's actually a harder thing to talk about on air than it is to write about in a way. But it seems very clear that this was, first of all, kind of like a religiously motivated these white girls are not Muslim, therefore you can do what you want with them. Secondly, they're not Pakistani, therefore they're kind of racially inferior. And thirdly, they're kind of our property and we own them and we can trade them amongst each other. And we have a right to do this because we are, the majority community in these towns. And it really strikes me. Neve wrote a piece during the week saying, well, is there any danger of this happening in Ireland? And obviously people read it and there are people motivated to say, yeah, the government isn't doing enough. But I think if you look at how this happened in the UK, you've got to look at these towns like Rochdale, Oldham, places like that, where Pakistani Muslims effectively became the majority in the town, and the towns were allowed to become essentially Pakistani Muslim culturally, religiously, and politically. Like, that's what that happened. And then the dominant culture of rural Pakistan was allowed to take hold in places like Bradford.
Here's the thing for me. I've said on the podcast before, I wouldn't have ever considered myself to be a feminist by any stretch of the imagination. But, years ago, I remember there would be this narrative around, the value of life in the world. And, say there was a famine or something in Africa or whatever. And people would talk about why is a life in New York more valuable than a life in, Somalia somewhere, or, or whatever was going on. There was this kind of part of the conversation was about how the world, seemed to care less about one life over another. And this made me think about that in the sense that we're in our early 40s now, and we have experienced in our lifetime a kind of a revolution about women's rights and also, the Me Too movement or whatever. And I looked it up today just as a matter of interest. And I'm not comparing like with like, but you'll get my point in a second. I looked it up today about how many victims there were of Harvey Weinstein. And at its top end, it was kind of like 100, right? Around 100. And this isn't to diminish or disparage or say anything about any of that. But there was an entire movement that was based off of that. And I suppose what this makes me think of is that I feel like now some victims, female victims of sexual assault and rape, are just worth more than others. And it's because of different factors, which I'll get to in a minute. But there was 1,400 women, girls, children here. And they just don't seem to have the same value, or they're not it's not taken as seriously, or, one of these girls in particular, a 12-year-old girl, went into a police station, said that she'd been sexually assaulted and was shooed away by the police, only to be taken by two men outside and then raped again. I just think that as we're, looking at the Me Too movement, and we're supposed to be so evolved, and I know this didn't happen yesterday, but we're supposed to be so evolved. And, when things have happened in Ireland, it's about, we have ads running about consent classes and have the consent conversation with your uncle and your dad and your this or whatever. But it just feels to me like there is still a double standard, that some female victims are worth more than others. And if you're a female victim that somehow interrupts or might be damaging to someone else's interpretation of social cohesion, you just don't matter as much. And when we're dismantling the patriarchy and getting rid of men like Harvey Weinstein, which is totally fine by me, then your victimhood is okay and you can talk about it or whatever. But if it might damage race relations because it's an uncomfortable nettle for people to grasp, then your victimhood isn't just quite as important. And I have a major, major issue with that. If I'm sexually assaulted next week or whatever, is that less valuable or less important than somebody who's got better political opinions than me? Because that's what it's starting to look like. You're just not the right kind of victim. And so that, to come full circle on my point, maybe I wasn't a feminist before because I was measuring myself against some of the more high profile lefty feminists that we see on the news. But it turns out maybe I'm actually more of a feminist than they really are, because I think all women, girls are victim, regardless of whether the predator that's raping them doesn't fit into the agenda or not. They're victims no matter what. The women who were raped on the 6th of October in Gaza, or who were brought into Gaza, they were victims. Those women who were gang raped and kidnapped, they're victims too. They didn't get as much airtime either because that didn't suit the agenda. So you're either for girls or you're not, but you don't get to a la carte pick your victims depending on what suits your political agenda. And that's what this feels a little bit like to me.
Yeah. First of all, I endorse everything you said. But second of all, I think there's also more to it, because it's not just a failure of feminism on that level. I mean, some of these girls, there were incidents in the story of like some of these girls, young girls, like 13, 14, who are in the care of social workers, who were in relationships, and like, you know, in relationships, i.e. they had been groomed and told they were the girlfriends of various, like, you know, men in their 30s or whatever.
Some of them were groomed, and some of them were just straight up raped, though. Like, there wasn't that much grooming.
But oftentimes the grooming preceded the rape. You know, so they have some guy would say, "There, I'm your boyfriend. I'm going to marry you," and all the rest of it. Oh, by the way, come and sleep with my friends, and then they'd be raped. So it's like, you know, the process of how this happened. Having read the cases is quite. But my point is, on some cases, British social workers drove these girls to meet these men. Drove them there, like living in that community, knowing what was going on, and they absolutely knew. Drove them there. You know, police officers. There was a specific incident where a police officer countered a Pakistani Englishman with a 14-year-old girl in a car on the side of the road with her head in his lap. And I won't get more graphic than that. And the police officer said, "What are you doing there?" And the Pakistani Englishman said, "She's given me a BJ." And the policeman effectively said, "Yeah, carry on, mate." Like that happened. Like, so it wasn't just, this is a complete failure of the British state to protect people. And I think, to come to your level of some victims being differently, I think there's a deep classism here as well about this is all these girls are good for. You know, this is all these girls are good for. You know, fair play, you have your jolly, she's going to end up as a prostitute or something anyway. Fair enough. Like, there's obviously the cultural and the elements, and a lot of people on the right are focusing very heavily on the kind of like Pakistani Muslim angle, right? As I think they should. But there's another angle here too, which is, this is the state. This is how it conducts itself. This is how you trust the people. Like, you know, when we have referendums in Ireland, like, give more power to TUSLA, put civil servants in charge of more things, expand the power of the state. I saw Jennifer Whitmore this week saying, you know, the state should take over RIP.ie and should do death notices as well. This is the culture you empower when you empower the state, of kind of like, this ain't my problem, Gov, and it's going to cost me too much to be the one person who flags it, so I'll just let it go there. And eventually it's like literally one or two brave journalists and police officers who were the ones to put up their hand and go, we need to talk about this. While tens of thousands of people, literally tens of thousands of people, knew what was happening and kept their gobs shut. Many of them,
and people who did bring it up were ridiculed. And people, politicians and people who did bring it up were ridiculed, called racist, like absolutely like cancelled in some cases for bringing it up. And so it's nothing to do, like, forget that, yes, there's people who are overly focusing on the Pakistani element and the cultural element and all of that. But also many people who weren't from Pakistan allowed this to continue going on and did nothing about it. So, and these are people, as I say, who will talk about progress and girls and Me Too and all this. Spare me. Like, nobody's going to talk to me, or I'm not going to take anybody seriously in the future who, you know, journalists and stuff who all would have been hearing this. It's like Harvey Weinstein. I've said it before. Like Oprah Winfrey and all these really powerful people coming out and going, oh my God, you all knew. You just did nothing. You did nothing until it was socially and culturally like convenient for you to do so. That's not bravery. That's bullshit.
Yeah, but the funny thing is, in all these situations, and I'm not defending anyone here. Just let me be absolutely clear. I'm not defending anyone. You're right. Because I like to think I would have been one of the people who would have put my hands up and said, this is going on, it needs to stop, it's creepy, stop it. But everyone thinks that, don't they? Everyone thinks I'd be the person who would have spoken up. And the reality is we're not, because we're all subject to the same fears. I was talking to somebody the other day who said to me something I've known for a long time. It wasn't news. It basically said, if you go into the Irish criminal courts, vast majority of crime, or the most common people convicted of crimes, are members of the travelling community, which is only 40,000 strong and yet is massively overrepresented in Irish prisons. The number of people willing to say that publicly, that Irish travellers commit far more crime disproportionately than basically any other demographic in the country, is vanishingly small. Number of people who say it in public because they're afraid. It's the exact same kind of dynamic, Sarah, where people are afraid of being cancelled. If they had said, look, this is mainly Pakistani Muslim men abusing white girls in Bradford, and there's a real issue here, and by the way, I think it's racially motivated, right? And then all of a sudden you get cancelled, get deselected from the Labour Party and so on.
But do you think that if 12-year-old traveller girls were going into a local police station and saying that they're being sexually assaulted on this scale, that the guards would just go home, sober up?
You'd hope not, wouldn't you?
Well,
you hope not. Can we say for certain with the history of this country? I mean, similar things happen. And I can see the kind of people at home kind of going, oh, McGurk is such a useless conservative. He's going to bring it right back to the church. And but the same kind of thing was at play, right? It's the same kind of, the instinct to protect the institution. The smartest thing I read this week, I wish I could attribute it because I just saw it in an email. And I don't know whether it was a reader sent it in or it appeared in an article, but basically said, whatever the dominant idea in a society is at a given time, that's the one people are allowed to die for. And by which they mean, we will ignore stuff to protect the idea. When the idea in Ireland was, when protecting the institution of the church, certain people were comfortable with covering stuff up. And when the idea is multiculturalism, as it is in the UK, those girls don't matter a damn compared to the imperative to protect the big idea. I think that's
fine. But then next time we're being lectured to about Me Too and girls and whatever, just say some girls, because that's what it is. The right girls, not all girls, not working class girls, not if it damages the narrative, not if it's inconvenient, not if we're on the other side. If it's those girls, that doesn't matter that much. That's fine.
All right. Okay. Have you any final thoughts before we wrap it up for this, our first week back? We ease ourselves back into it.
I do not. I am ready for 2025. I think it's going to be a goodie.
I hope it's going to be a goodie. Well, at least maybe it can only get warmer. Put it that way. At least here in North Tipperary, it can only get warmer. There's music to Eamon Ryan's ears. All right, folks, thank you very much for joining us and for staying loyal to us and not deserting over to that other podcast. We're very grateful that you've stuck with Sarah and I, and we anticipate that you will for the rest of the year as well. Thank you very much. We wish you, I think both of us, a very happy and successful 2025. We hope only good things for you, and we will be here to keep you sane throughout the year, or at least, if not keep you sane, remind you that there are 2 more people going insane with you in this nut house of a country. Take care.